Good evening, all. Kind of going to be a boring kind of a turning night, but afraid I'd bring you along for the adventures of doing the same thing over and over again, which is trees. And what you call way behind on getting these things done. These are what you call a painted tree. These are for the ladies that paint with my wife. So it's basically all spindle type work. I did manage yesterday to get some of them ready. But it's, like I say, it's one right after the other, all the same. All spindle work. If you're not real proficient at doing spindle type work, this will be a good practice for you. A lot of times I do these out of tree branches. In this case, these are not branches. This is some soft maple. As you can see, it's extremely repetitive. But it is very good practice for spindle work. Really for any kind of work, because it's making you stay in contact with the bevel the whole time. These are not a project that gets sanded. I shouldn't say, well, they get a tiny bit of sanding done to them, but it's all pretty much right off the tool. So in this case, it's pretty much all about how fast you can get them done. And keeping them relatively the same. Pretty much use two tools, parting tool and in this case a 3/8 spindle gouge. Just one cove after the other. Like I say, not really very exciting kind of work. But it sort of is in the line of production work. Not something I'm a fan of. But I do these. And these are being done out of a very plain just sugar maple. My dad had this tree cut down in his road a couple years ago, so this is pretty much dry wood. Do these a lot of times in much wetter wood than this. Any sort of so-called skill involved in these is trying to get them to look the same, or at least close to the same. Like I said, there is no sanding, so I don't. Got to be fairly precise on my cutting. At least for the last cut, anyhow. also forces you to do a little bit of work left-handed. And try and keep them relatively the same as far as the cove goes. The cove does get bigger in each separate piece as it goes up the stem, as sort of a real tree would do. Of course, the last cut's always the best cut. So take our time. Right to the center. When you get to the center and the flute's closed, then it doesn't grab a hold of that up there. I'm not liking the curve that I got there. That's a little better. And I try and keep the flat areas pretty much as close to being the same as what I can do. So use a little bit of a small parting tool. It just saves me some time. I get it down closer to where I want it to be before I start making the curve. You can do it with a 1/2 inch spindle gouge as well. It's a little bit different with the 1/2 inch one, because the handle I have to move my body more. You get the little chunks that want to stick to the edge of the gouge, or they break off down there where there's nothing behind it. And you have to be a little bit careful not to jam into that top piece. And my 3/8 gouge is on a very, very short handle, so I don't have to swing my body so much out of the road with that one. That's why a lot of times you'll see me go back to that. That's pretty close. I'm going to cut it just a little bit more. When I get down, probably on the next one, I didn't get it out yet. I do have a 3/8 detail gouge, which is round with a considerably longer bevel. So that means the handle, in this case, it wants to hit back here a little bit. And it gets that deep. Deeper yet with the parting tool, I'm going to have to stop and open that groove up a little bit more. Otherwise it'll have a tendency to bind up a bit. of grain like that in there should leave me a very clean surface. At least that's the plan anyhow. Could stop and take a look. It usually does. It usually is very, very clean. Might leave a little whizzers in the bottom, which I did, which is where I have to get the longer grind. Oh, we're not doing too bad. Doing some boring kind of work tonight. Making trees. These trees are to be painted, which I think that's what they did with them. They liked them last year. This was at a painting kind of a show, decorative painters. And one of my wife's friends has a booth there, so I sold these last year and they went over quite well. As in the tune of about 15 to 20 minutes. Almost all of them were gone. So that's always a plus. Because these are just plain wood. Nothing really exciting about them at all. The ones I would take to a craft show for myself, I generally have done with 3 branches. And then they'll usually have some bark left on them. But for them, they don't really care. Because they're just going to paint them. At least that's the lady that I gave some on to that has the booth. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a nice little simple project, I think. Somebody wants to try it out their luck at doing a little bit of hollowing. And it's not, it's some pretty simple wood to get a hold of. Because there again, it would be 3 branches. That's what I was using the other night. So I mean, it's nothing spectacular. Here's where I have to go to my normal spindle gouge would be at about 40 degrees. This is probably about 30 degrees, 35 maybe. I've never measured it. This is pretty much the only thing this tool ever gets used for, is to do these. But my normal grind, as you saw, I was ready to hit back here, where that one, the longer bevel angle allows me to get into a little bit tighter spaces like that. I don't think my mark is very good there. I have a pattern that I made for these. I don't really remember what the numbers are. But I added like a 1/16 of an inch as they come down, because a normal real like pine tree or something like that is going to be bigger at the bottom, less space as you go up. At least that was my philosophy. I know some people at my turning club make a bunch of these too, and they don't. He just kind of goes at it and doesn't really measure anything. I sort of like to measure them just by virtue of that I keep them closer to the same. Because, I mean, it doesn't matter like for the ones that would be sold at a craft show. because they don't, you know, these women that are going to buy this stuff at the painting show, why they're used to having things that are done on some sort of a copy lathe or something like that, CNC type stuff. So everything's the same. So I try and get them fairly close to the same. And certainly not a production printer by any means. So for me to do a whole bunch of the same, it's just not something I normally do. So if I don't use a pattern, then I don't keep these very even. And I feel it makes it a little bit faster for me, because then you're not thinking about something. You're just strictly turning. Like I said earlier, this is a non-staining kind of a project, so the idea of clean cut is where it's at. This would be the base of the tree, so I do bring the cove in much straighter, so it sort of gives it like a trunk. As long as the spindle gouge is flat, when it makes contact with that upper part, it doesn't grab a hole. Actually, it just sort of scrapes across there. Clean up my pencil mark. Slow our speed way down. See if my knurling tool is going to cooperate today. Problem with this, it goes along. I do a thing with our local turning group at a farm show. So we're just going to drop some oil in there. Not really what I wanted it to do was to leave them full of oil. So I think we'll cut them back off and do it again. I'm not always very vigilant, I guess you'd say, of keeping this thing well oiled. Still gonna drop some. I used it a little bit yesterday because I was working on some of these yesterday, and it actually seized up a little bit on me. A little bit of oil is not going to hurt anything with them. Like I say, these women really don't know the difference on things like that anyhow. Go back down here to the base. We'll cut this free. There is a point in the tail, in the live center. It doesn't stick out very far, but I keep it there until the very end. Otherwise, these things will flop around. They don't have very good support out here at this point. As long as you're gentle, it goes okay. The extent of the sanding, the most part of the sanding would probably be this little end down here on the ball. I try and make that look like a ball. And then the rest of it is just knocking these sharp corners off. Because when you become fairly proficient with the spindle gouge like that, those edges right there are very sharp. This being a softer wood, they're maybe not quite as sharp, but if you did this in something hard, like a hard maple or something like that, it can be very, very sharp. So I just take the corners off, that's it. And I don't do any sanding down in here. You really, I mean, there's some little undulations or whatever as it would go up through, but you know, a natural tree doesn't grow perfectly smooth either, so that's kind of the way I look at that. Anything I definitely do not do much in the way of being fancy on the bottom of them. Just see where I'm at for length. That's a 7-inch. What the plan is to do 8, 7, and 6 as far as height. Because that's one of the things they liked last year, was the fact that I had like 3 different sizes. Also helps them get in their pocketbook pretty quick and buy all 3. I mean, that was a plus in itself. And do undercut the base. It will not be perfectly clean and smooth in there, but as long as I take a really light cut for the basically inside cut there, and it's a square parting tool, so it's sort of scraping as it goes down. Just remember not to go too far before you sand that little bit. That's a pain in the you-know-what. Just go back and sand just that little edge. There again, it leaves it sharp. As you can see, it starts to wobble fairly quickly. So we don't want to send it flying. And we're left with, let's shut that off. We're just left with a tiny little nub where I'll put a 2-inch sanding disc in there and take that little nub off. That's what they look like. And there's a bunch of them. I have a handful of them made so far. So we have a couple different sizes. And they're basically the same size. Like I say, it's very monotonous kind of work to do. That I will say. I have 2, 4, 6, 8. I have 10 of them ready. What I figured out there was to keep it from being a little bit less monotonous, maybe a little bit faster even, rather than going from a square block to a tree. I spent, I don't know, an hour or so yesterday, maybe something like that, where I come down here and got the square blocks ready, and then turn them to a cylinder and then put a taper on them. This one I think should be a 6-inch tree. At least that was the hope. That one's still more like 7, so somewhere thereabouts. The only time it really matters is when you go to when I go to price them. I price these at $2 an inch for that show. Of course, the lady that has the booth said I should get $3 an inch for them, but I'm like, I really would rather go home with none of them at the end of the day. So if I make a little bit less on them, kind of like so be it. I think this material here is actually some white birch, which is softer yet than the sugar maple. So you'll see it will actually really sort of polish up really nicely. As long as I take my time and do things right. It doesn't take a whole lot out there to hold it. I mean, it's down to probably 1/8 of an inch out there. So it's not a lot of material that's holding it, but it's enough to keep it from flopping around and vibrating that as you go back. Because you can break them when you get back in here, and all that's out there will be flopping around. So you spent 10 or 15 minutes or more making something, and just because you're sort of trying to cut a little corner there and not do things kind of the right way. It can cost you dearly. Then instead of having a piece that you can do something with, now you have a piece of firewood. And if there's any little, there's some little tool marks in there, like I said, these get painted, so they're using a, you know, the sort of the, I would call it the craft type paint, which is rather thick to start with, so it will fill in any little tiny marks that you may leave behind. Right there, that's probably the hardest cut there is on them, is to pick up that cut partway down that curve. Cut back for a line. Like I say, it's very monotonous. I certainly commend those people that you would see on Instagram and that, those production turners that they're doing multiple spindles, spare spindles and that kind of stuff, day in and day out. That's not in my vocabulary. Hardest part's right up underneath there. A little bit of patience and it works. And it's up underneath, so if you leave a mark or two up there, like I said, I don't get too concerned. This stuff actually has a little bit of spalting in it. So it would probably look alright to put this stuff here whenever I do this for the craft show, as far as the trees go. I usually just put a beeswax on and call it good. You can put a little oil on first if the piece of wood is nice enough. Sort of do the Richard Rasmussen routine. The only difference is I got some beeswax because I wanted to make up some of the mineral oil and beeswax. Like the cutting board finish in that. The problem with beeswax is it usually comes in a big chunk. So in order to get up in there, I took some of that stuff because it's in pellets and melted it down and put it in like a little plastic lid so that it's only about 1/4 of an inch thick. Just a nice little disc, which will allow me to get up in underneath here really nice and easy. As long as the flute's totally closed when you go up against there like that, why you can sort of becomes a negative rake scraper. Not going to be as clean of a cut as it would be if you actually cut it, but it's basically good enough for something like this. That one's supposed to be a 6-inch tree, not a 7-inch tree though. Smaller in diameter. Yeah, I think that's, now I know that's where I had that marked as. So that's what it's going to be. Clean that up, because the knurling tool just basically makes dents in there, so. See if I can go out here and get the rest of the oil off of it. It's got most of it. These knurling tools only like about 500 RPMs. So if you run them too fast, because there is no bearing in there, it's just a shaft, then they get hot. And just be patient and hold it there. A fair amount of pressure pushing forward. And then we always stop and take a look. I don't always get the same. I sort of have two different patterns on there for some unknown reason on there. I didn't push hard enough on the top one. Just to get, all I want is just a little bit of a texture on there. So it looks like something a little bit maybe different. Normal. This time we'll remember to do this first. And then we'll go back up here and take this off and do our little, tiny little bit of sanding that we do. And see now that one compared to the other one, of course it's shorter. Yeah, it's not wobbling around and carrying on like the other one was. Like I say, this is very monotonous kind of work. It's really monotonous to get the blanks ready too. So I did it a little bit ahead of time. Not to mention my 11-month-old granddaughter is staying with us right now, so not allowed really to come down here and make noise at night when I would come home from work. As we found out the other Wednesday night, as long as I don't do anything that's really loud, well, she sleeps right through it. So that's why I had got a whole bunch of these blanks ready. That I maybe could work on some during the week if they don't work me too hard at work. So you'll reach over. I'm still going in at an angle, so it always breaks it off back here rather than tears a hole, which is always a good thing. So that would be next size down. I don't have one of the big ones. Maybe we'll do a big one next, just so that you can see the difference. The big ones all start out at about 3 inches in diameter. And that little block there would actually be big enough to use for something, maybe. Some more as well. Grab a bow gouge quick like and clean off the end of that. These little blocks come in very handy. Little jam blocks for different things. Thank you. Makes you want to go out to the shop and make some trees, don't it? Get down that rabbit hole. It is a rabbit hole, I can tell you that right now. Start making these and I don't know. Women seem to like them. I don't know. Any that come to the craft shows or whatever. I've had some of them pick up 3 or 4 or 5 of them even at a craft show, and they're all, like I say, they're all tree branch type stuff. There's very seldom does any of this sort of this style end up at a craft show, unless I have something nice. Oh yeah, yeah, because now when you start doing the old gathering up wood, just like the piece I did the other Wednesday night, that's another rabbit hole too, because now you say, wow, you know, I can do something with a tree branch that would be, you know, 5 inches in diameter, 4 or 5 inches in diameter. So, yeah, you just, the rabbit hole of collecting wood. And those pieces like that, you just sort of, I usually put them under, like underneath my deck. It's in the shade, it's outside. I leave them, whatever, 3 or 4 feet long, 5 feet long maybe. And they just sit there until I decide I want to do something with them. And they certainly aren't perfectly dry, but they're dry enough to do what I'm going to use them for. And if they crack, like, so be it, unless they crack in half. There's a lot of people seem to think that crack, that, you know, one of these trees, they may crack from top to bottom. And they seem to think that's, you know, that they do the thing that that some people might say, well, that you know, that added character to it. And I'm like, okay, if it adds character to it, it's fine, it's yours, you know. To me, it's sort of a failure, but definitely one thing with doing this kind of work, though, it does make you a better spindle turner. It really, to me, it makes you a better turner all the way around. It helps in your turning. I started teaching some classes at my local woodcraft store, and this is one of my classes is spindle work, and this is one of the things I will have them do, because it's very repetitive. I mean, basically it's all coves, but then they understand picking up the cut. When I start out, it's basically a V cut. And I'm not curving, I'm just going straight in. And then you start making the curve. It sort of forces you to turn a little bit left-handed. This makes it another skill building kind of procedure. Sort of all kind of little projects that you can do with, you know, the branch type material. You can do the trees, you can do mushrooms. There for quite some time, doing some of the couple craft shows a year. The mushrooms were very popular for quite a while. I mean, you almost couldn't make them fast enough. And they sort of petered out a little bit. I think it's something I will have, hopefully, a couple of us to do. Because there's some of this material that I'm using. These were cut at like 17 inches long, something like that, with a chainsaw. End sealed and left to dry. And some of them near the crack. Oh, okay. What did you use to hollow it with? Because there's certainly multiple ways of doing that. I just did it kind of the, I don't know, you want to call it lazy man's way? I don't necessarily call it the lazy man's way. I call it using the tools at my disposal. I've done them with just handheld hollowing tools as well. I'm not necessarily going for that super thin. I just sort of find it a little easier, a little quicker. There's where you mess up. Got to keep the flute closed a little longer than I did. Got pushing speedy. That little, I don't know if you're going to call it a vase or what have you, the other night that I made, they were kind of disappointing too. I made a couple of them for the craft shows last year, and I still have them. I mean, there was a lot of people commented that they were kind of neat little things and whatnot. And I don't price my stuff that overly high to start with, and nobody seemed to want to take them home with them. They were both done in walnut. Like the one the other night, and I try to get some of that. Well, this limb-wood that I have has a lot of sapwood on it, so that kind of makes them a little bit more interesting. Get a little bit of color variation. And as I said the other night, I didn't finish sanding that one. It's still sitting here somewhere. It is kind of interesting. And there again, that was something that I saw Richard Graffin do. Was sanding some of that stuff. That's, I would call it more like damp wood. And I think that's how he refers to it. Certainly isn't super wet. But it does work, so if you can, like that little thing there, whatever you want to call them, a little pot. You know, I should have taken the time. That's one thing I'm not allowed to do. I'm not allowed to turn a dust collector on. So to sand that, especially being in walnut, would kind of be a no-no for me, because the walnut doesn't necessarily like me. But I did a cedar bowl. That's the upcoming video, I guess you'd say, where I started right from the log outside with the chainsaw. And, you know, brought it in. And Put it on, turned it. It does need to. That's why I'm being a very bad boy and not. These should be. This is something, and I said that a while back when I was doing it. Having a little trouble getting into live streams right now. Life gets in the road. This is the kind of thing, though, like I did there. I mean, I took the hour and a half, or whatever it took to get, 6 or 8 of these blanks ready to go, and then they're sitting here ready to go. And you come down and you're going to do some work or whatever. It's always a good thing to practice, get warmed up, so to speak, a little bit. So do something like this first before you go doing something that's meaningful. It does help. I think the one that I think Mark Below talked about that is, going Christmas ornament or something simple first. You can even do some of this with the bulb out. This is what's in there right now, because I didn't switch it. Anything to sort of, I view it as anything to sort of speed up the process a little bit. I do use a 5/8 bowl gouge some, not much, yeah. I mainly use half-inches because I usually don't do any real big bowls. So I just have a tendency to stick with my half-inch ones. I use 2 different grinds though. I do use the 40 degree grind as well as the swept back grind. Got 2 identical bowl gouges, both half-inch. I have the same thing in a 5/8 as well, but like I say, I don't. The 5/8, especially if you were to put those on a scale as far as weight goes. Probably why I don't use the bigger ones that much, or as much, because the weight difference is tremendous. So if you're going to spend, for me, if I'm going to come down here and spend a couple hours, my arms get tired. Both the 5/8 ones, I have long handles for them. The handle's longer, bigger in diameter, so it means it's heavier to use. Now, if I wanted to come down here and do half a dozen something, like green currant bowls or something like that, then the half-inch gouge can be a little bit more advantageous because you can take a bigger cut. Put my 1 5/8 gouge It's been around for a very long time. Like I said, I just don't. I sort of switched over to the 1/2 inch and kind of like never went back to the bigger one. And I do have, like a lot of the other stuff, I do have 2 of them because I have one that has the 40-degree grind on it. And some of it's probably the fact that I took some classes with Jimmy Clues, and that's actually the bowl gouge that I use is the Jimmy Clues version in Thompson, that Thompson makes. His philosophy on the 2 different size gouges like that, where you don't take a sledgehammer to crack a nut. So he says his philosophy was, why do you want to use a big heavy bowl gouge unless you're doing big heavy work, which I do very little of. Most of my bowls are in the maybe 10 to 14 inch category, something like that. Let's see whether I got some whizzers on that one. So clean up that first before I forget it. But everybody has their own philosophy on what they use, what they like to use. I am not a carbide user, but some people like them. They would not do a very good, they don't do a good enough job for things like this as far as I'm concerned. I do have one laying here. Kind of that'd be one of the wonders of being basically a part-time employee of Woodcraft, is they have all this stuff, because they did some classes where they used strictly carbide. And unfortunately, gentleman that was teaching those classes ran into some health issues, and this is pretty much right when I got started working for him, like 6 months or so ago. Anything I do for him is teach classes. I don't work in the store. But he had some health issues, and they're like, well, we got these classes scheduled. Can you come teach them in it's strictly carbide? I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So show me the tools, show me what you got. And they did. And I'm like, good, which one can I take home with me? And they're like, you can take them all home if you want. And I just need 1 or 2. First off, I had to see how dull they were, which they were. So again, those people that use the carbide, as I found out that in teaching the classes, when their carbide tool gets dull, they just go out there in the store and spend another $15 or $16 or whatever the case was for those tools, for the cutter, and they just replace the cutter. So that was the first order of business that I did with those people, was showed them You know, they're all like, for $15, I'm not going to mess with it. I'm like, a little diamond card scrape or a hone does wonders for them. I said it only takes a couple minutes. So that's basically how I started the class, where I already had one apart, and took it on the diamond card. And 5 minutes later, or less, he had a tool that was just as sharp as a brand new one out there. May actually even be sharper. And we're like, huh. I said, y'all do whatever you want. I said, don't tell anybody how to spend their money. I said, but that's what I would do with them. And that's what I did with all their tools. That was the first thing I did, was take them all apart and use the diamond on them and sharpen them all up. No matter what tools you're using, they got to be sharp. They just doesn't. And if you're a pen turner, something along those lines, then I could see it more so. You're going to turn bowls and spindles and things like that. They just don't. They don't cut clean enough for me. My idea of the turning world is not to see how much sanding I can do, it's how little sanding I can do. So that's where I didn't like them. The one that I brought home, like I said, I do a lot of bowls, and that was the class that I was going to teach. So I brought one home and did it that way, and that's what I told, I said, the owner of the Woodcraft School probably wouldn't like to hear some of the comments or some of the things I say in the class. It's like, people are looking for an honest opinion. At least I would be. And generally I will show them the difference. Even in that carbide class. And so I told them, I said, it is a carbide class. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what you're going to use. I said, but generally in the class setting like that, it's like, I had a couple of the people tell me, I was like, yeah, I just come here to learn a little bit, and whatever I mess up, you get to fix. It's like, okay. So I would fix them with a steel tool. It was educational, even for me. It was kind of educational as far as what they will or will not do. I did learn that there is some ways, if you're using the carbide ones, that you can flip them up on their edge a little bit, and then they sort of become more like a shear scraper rather than just a flat scraper. So that did help and made them cut a little bit smoother and a little bit cleaner. Unless somebody wants something, so bear with me a second. Alright, wants to know if I want to go to the grocery store, and we will here very directly. 6:40, so where were we? I'm just cutting this off. Yeah, as you said earlier about making your own, it's like, you're going to use the carbide, especially this day and age where all the the joiners and planers and stuff like that are all going to the carbide cutters at the helical head. Why, they're very readily available and you can buy them pretty reasonable. So, you know, that one didn't cut overly clean out there, but it's the bottom of a tree, so like I say, I don't necessarily worry too much about it. I'll show you the 3 different sizes. So that's basically what we're doing. 3 sizes. I mean, you could even go smaller than that one yet. I don't too often go real small with them. Let's see, how long have we been on? Yeah, we've been on almost 2 hours. I mean, not quite that long. Then the other thing is I kind of leave them sit around down here, and then I'll put the disc sander on. Since she's not in bed yet, let me go grab that quick. Get some actually totally finished. There's sort of a lot of, in some ways, they're a lot of work for a little bit of money, really. Like I say, that 8-inch tree is going to yield you a whopping $16 for it. But it's not all about the money. So I just have a 2-inch disc. It probably has like 150 on there. Yeah, the overhead will probably still show it best anyhow. But I use dust collection for that. So I gotta walk over here for a second. Across that very center to get rid of that last little bit. It helps I open the right glass gate. Out a little bit further, but generally speaking, I don't, that's kind of where I draw the line on them, that I don't worry about that last little bit in the bottom. The one I would have to use considerably longer material for one. Ideally would be to use spindle gouge or something like that and make that a nice fine cut across there rather than party tool. And some of it, I should say a lot of it, comes down to the point of how much time are you going to spend to sort of do a perfectionist, I guess you'd say, versus getting more overdone. Of course, This is something that should have been being worked on the last 18 months. As usual, it comes down to tying down the wire. Probably take the Dremel or something like that and chop that off too. This is easy to do this after that. And it takes a couple seconds to do it. One of these extra blocks yesterday, and there again I saw that on YouTube. Did that? I think it was that Linda Farber did like a mushroom and then used the Fordham and put a bunch of texturing on it, and then did a dry brush roots thing on it, which that'll be up in my wife's wheelhouse to do that. But I did do one of them yesterday. And you brought the Fordham over here, so I have dust collection. Did a bunch of texturing on it, and then I turned it black. Of course, my wife said that since I turned it black, I could use some of the grain fillers and things like that on it, which I could, but I was kind of planning on me do the turning and the texturing, color it, dye it black, and maybe a coat of shellac or something on top of that. And then just kind of turn it over to her and say, have a nice day, dear. Make sure you get a couple of these done for beginning of October. So that's pretty much all I have for tonight. So where are we at? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I only have 11 of them done so far. Got a long way to go in a short time, unfortunately. But I think that's all we're going to do for tonight. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Feel free. There's a cedar blank that I had. There's a, like I say, that's an upcoming video. This is the other half of the half a log, I should say. But I really need to wrap that up because it's already has cracked some. But if nothing else, if that crack goes in there too far, which it very well may, I probably could still get some like 2.5-inch blocks or something like that out of it. There again, trees. Cedar trees are kind of nice to do because that is a red cedar, which is the aromatic kind. So you just turn them, don't do anything with them. You know, turn a little tree out of them, and people at a craft show will pick them up, and they're like, oh, is that cedar? I'm like, well, put it up to your nose and you'll find out. And they're like, oh yeah, gotta have it. I'm like, okay. So, but it's different to work with too. But that's all I got for you. Got to go to the grocery store because I got to go back to work tomorrow. So you guys have a wonderful week, and hopefully we'll be back next Saturday evening. I gotta get back into the routine, but I got probably another 8 weeks of them being here, so I can't get too carried away on a Saturday evening. One of the things my daughter said I definitely wasn't allowed to do was, you know, sharpen any tools, so kind of limits me a little bit as to what I can do. So, other than that, you all have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.